unfortunately, everybody that is going to be here is here. So I'll just get started. I think pretty much everybody whose face I can see, I recognize that they have been at this program before. Darlene, I'm not sure if you've done Novelty before.
I've done, this is like my third one.
Okay. So we're just going to do it the same way that we always have, where Emily and I are going to sort of trade off. I will let you know that I'm attempting to record this program. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mute everybody except for Emily and I. So while we're talking, that way only our voice will show up on the recording. So I just want to give you guys a heads up about that. But there is the chat function on the screen. So if you have a question while we're talking, you can just chat and we'll monitor that and answer any questions as need be. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. My goal also was to share our flyer with you like we always have, but it's not letting me log in to get my file. So we're going to be emailing that to all of you after the program, along with all the stuff that we talk about like we traditionally do as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and mute everybody's audio except for myself and Emily, and we will get started. And a couple of people already had themselves muted, so thank you very much. Okay, so the first book that I'm going to talk about today is called The Switch, and it's by an author named Beth O'Leary. She wrote a book last year that I might have talked about at a Novelty called The Flat Share. So when I saw that she had another book coming out, I was really excited because I found she's, a pretty warm-hearted writer. Her books are always sort of funny and kind, and that's kind of what I needed at this time. This book does come out on August 18th, so if it sounds good to you, you can go ahead and place your holds. We do have it on order. And so The Switch is about, it's a grandmother-granddaughter story. So when overachiever Lena Cotton is ordered to take a 2-month sabbatical from work after blowing a big project, she escapes to her grandmother Eileen's house for some long overdue rest. Her grandmother Eileen is newly single and about to turn 80. And she'd like a second chance of love, but her tiny Yorkshire village does not offer many eligible gentlemen. So after living together for a visit, they decide to do a 2-month swap. So Eileen will move down to London and look for love there. She'll take over her granddaughter's flat and learn all about casual dating, swiping right, and city neighbors. And meanwhile, Lena will stay in her grandmother's house and learn about everything in rural Yorkshire. The grandmother's cottage, her garden, the quiet village, and all the little neighborhood projects that her grandmother takes care of. So by stepping into each other's shoes, they realize it's more difficult than either of them would have expected. Well, swapping their lives helped Eileen and Lena find themselves and maybe even find true love. So I thought this book was perfect for summer and anyone who's having a little hard time concentrating on books these days.
Okay. My next one is The Vanishing Half, which Becky had said that she had read. And again, like I said, I have been rereading books lately, so it's been a while since I read these, so I'm going to try my best to give you a good description. The Vanishing Half was a New York Times bestseller and a Good Morning America book club pick. It's about Stella and Desiree Vines. They're twins that grew up in a small southern Black community, but the rare thing about their community is the lightness of everyone's skin. Sometimes they could even pass off as white people. That was something that Stella will take advantage of a little bit later. They are identical and they run away at the age of 16, and that really brings out their differences from each other. Desiree wants to stay working in, I think it's Desiree. Stella wants to stay working in the city, and she ends up getting a job for a big corporation. She ends up falling in love and marrying her boss, who's white. He thinks that she's white, and it's something that she has to conceal for the rest of her life. Desiree ends up moving, she marries a Black man and moves back home with her daughter. She leaves him because he was abusive, and she takes her Black daughter back home to the same town that she once tried to escape. It was harder for her daughter because her daughter is also much darker than all of the people in the community, so that was a challenge for them that they had to face. So while she was struggling with colors at home, Stella was trying to secretly pass as white and stay that way in her community. The the sisters don't talk anymore. They've lost communication. Stella kind of cut off her whole entire family when she decided she was going to go the route she went. But you see the stories of Desiree back home in her hometown and Stella in her new town with her new family, and some situations that she gets herself into, a lot of it regarding the color of people's skin. Little do they know that much later, both of their adult daughters end up in a chance meeting, and the secrets between the sisters slowly begin to unravel. It weaves together multiple strands and generations of this family from the Deep South to California from the 1950s and the 1990s. It's a riveting and emotional story with a brilliant exploration. This is me quoting somebody, obviously, I did not say this, of the historic history of passing. And it looks well into the issues of race. I thought it was a really good book. It was nice. It was a good story to follow both sisters. And it was kind of sad in a way because they didn't talk anymore. So you have anticipation building throughout the novel of what's going to happen between the sisters as they get older.
Okay, my next book is called Miss Graham's Cold War Cookbook by Celia Reese. And despite that cozy sounding title, this is actually a fast-paced, female-centric espionage novel. The main character, her name is Edith Graham, and she is a young English woman who spent World War II at home, teaching school and looking after her mother. And once the war ends, though, she is ready for something different, and she wants to do something important. So she volunteers to go to Germany to set up schools intended to help feed and educate children who have been displaced by the war, and to set these young Germans on a democratic path. Because Edith is fluent in German, she's quickly hired, and then just as quickly, she is approached by British intelligence to be on the lookout for Nazis hiding out in Germany, especially, and then she finds out that the main target and why they've really recruited her is it turns out that her old boyfriend from her Oxford days, named Kurt von Staveno, is a highly sought former SS doctor who's wanted for war crimes, and he's disappeared into Germany, and they're really hoping that she can track him down and bring him to justice. So Edith's trip through Germany and her move to the Baltic city of Lübeck are very eye-opening. The cities are in ruins. There's near-starving, displaced people everywhere. The black markets thrive, and figuring out who isn't a Nazi or a Nazi sympathizer is a challenge. So this search that Edith has looking for her old flame Kurt soon puts her in danger, and the story, really ratchets up the tension until the very final thrilling pursuit and ending. So the cookbook mentioned in the title refers to the way Edith passes her messages back to her handlers and updates the spy network. So she just, writes letters as if she's sharing recipes from her travels throughout Germany. So that's where that comes from. So I really haven't read a great deal about post-World War II Europe and the start of the Cold War. So this book really covered a lot of new territory for me. So for anybody who's looking, for a little different in the World War II genre, this might be it.
Okay, my next one is The Mountains Sing. It's available on Hoopla. It was one of the first books that I read out of this whole COVID thing because it was easy to get and available for everybody. It's been compared to Pachinko, which I keep getting it confused with because I read Pachinko around the exact same time. And then Homegoing, and also In the Shadow of the Banyan Tree, or the Banyan, pardon me, not the Banyan Tree. It's a multi-generational story of the Tran family, and it's set against the backdrop of the Vietnam War. Tran Julan is a grandmother, and it goes back and forth between the grandmother's time and then also the granddaughter's time, which is during the Vietnam War. So it goes back and forth. It's harder to explain how they move it back and forth. But anyway, Tran Julan was born in 1920, and she was forced to flee her farm with her 6 children during the land reform. Her son and her grandfather were taken, and it was when the poorer families were taking back from the richer families, and she had nowhere to go and she had to run. So she tried to travel north, but she had all 6 children with her. And the sad thing about her travels is that she would find situations where her children might be better off right where they were, rather than going with her on this journey. I know one of her sons ended up staying where there was like a soup kitchen, and he ended up waiting tables and staying with this lady and getting supported by her. She left another daughter with a family who was looking for an adopted child. And so she left some of them behind as she went on, and she always meant to go back and pick them up on her way back home, which she does. But it's sad to see the effect that that had on everybody. And then we go to her granddaughter, Huang, and her story deals with the aunts and uncles of her aunts and uncles, which were the grandmother's children who she had left in different places. There's lots of moving parts, but she's living with her grandmother now, and they're waiting for her mother and father and uncles to come home from the war. Some of them make it back, and you get to hear about their stories and how the war essentially broke them, and about how it is affecting their family all together now. It was interesting because I have never read anything from the perspective of Vietnam about the Vietnam War, so I thought that was really interesting. And it did remind me a lot of Min Jin Lee's Pachinko and Lisa C. and Amy Tan books. And so I really love those books. So I thought it was really good. I really enjoyed it. It reminded me a lot of those. And the history was just really interesting.
Okay, my next book is a mystery. I listened to it on audio, and it was on Hoopla, and I believe it still is. It's called 8 Perfect Murders by Peter Swanson. So this was a fun book that plays tribute to murder mysteries, thrillers, and to readers everywhere. So it says, why would the FBI be interested in Malcolm Kershaw? He's an expert on classic mystery books and co-owner of a bookstore. The reason the FBI is looking for him is because years ago, he published a list of the genre's most unsolvable murders, those that he found as a reader to be almost impossible to crack. And he called this list 8 Perfect Murders. And included on this list were titles such as Agatha Christie's ABC Murders, Strangers on a Train by Patricia Highsmith, and A Secret History by Donna Tartt, among several others. And now, unfortunately, some unsolved mysteries are bearing a strong resemblance to the books on that list. So Malcolm gets dragged into the investigation, and it quickly becomes apparent that this is not a coincidence between these unsolved murders and his list. So he needs to find out, does the killer know him? Is it a customer from his store? Is he a suspect? But the killer is out there and really watching Malcolm's every move. And there's a lot of diabolical threats. Clearly someone knows way too much about Mal's personal history, especially the secrets he's never told anyone, even his recently deceased wife. So Malcolm has a lot of stuff to hide personally as he's trying to help the FBI with these murders, while trying to simultaneously figure out, is he a suspect while they're dragging him around. So this was a fun book, and it was an easy listen.
Okay, my next one is In an Instant by Susan Redfern. And this one is very different from the other two. It's kind of like an action mystery. I wouldn't say it was really a thriller, but it has a lot of action in it. There's an accident in winter, and life is over instantly for 16-year-old Finn Miller. And it's from her perspective. So you're hearing it. She had just died in this accident with her family and some friends. And so she's watching everything happen and unfold. They're stuck off this cliff on a mountain in a van, and there's nothing around them. And they have to decide who's going to go and try to get help, who's going to stay. There's a lot of impossible choices and decisions that they have to make as survivors, especially because the one girl has passed. They want to know who wears her boots, who gets her gloves, who gets her jacket, and they fight over, well, they mentally are fighting with each other. They're making it look like everybody's really happy, but it's really not the case. And like, it's really interesting to see the dynamics between the people and how they shift and how everyone is like, this is my family and this is your family, and I'm going to worry about my family and not your family anymore, and we're not working together. And so it was really interesting to see how humans react to those situations. So Finn keeps vigil as she watches her family struggle and reclaim their lives. Jack, her father, tries to seek vengeance for the one person that he can blame. There's her sister who really her sister has a very hard time missing Finn and trying to find out what happened, and then also her best friend. So everybody has moments where they remember certain things, or they remember things differently than other people, and it kind of puts together this mystery or thriller kind of as who's responsible for what happened, like not necessarily the accident, but what happened after the accident, because one of her sisters and her sister's boyfriend just decided to go off on their own after someone had already tried to go and get help. And then again, some other people decide to venture outside of the van and go look for food. And their decisions are all big. I don't know how else to say it. They're huge decisions. They have great effects on everybody involved. So it was really interesting to see who was saved, how they were saved, and then afterward, people pointing the fingers and seeing who's to blame and what happens after that, because there is actually police that are involved with finding out what happened and getting everything figured out for the family. And it's also about carrying on, after something like that happens. So it was really interesting. It seems like it's over in an instant because it goes really, really quick. It was a good book.
Okay, the next book I'm going to talk about was one that I read this earlier this summer, and it's called The Lost and Found Bookshop by Susan Wiggs. She's an author that a lot of you may already be familiar with, and I'm always a sucker for any books that are set in a bookshop or a library, so this was right up my alley. In the wake of a shocking tragedy, the main character, Natalie Harper, inherits her mother's charming but extremely financially strapped bookshop in San Francisco. She also, at this time, instantly becomes the caretaker for her ailing grandfather, Andrew, her only living relative. So on top of, this tragedy that Natalie has just experienced, having to take over the struggling bookstore, her beloved grandfather is beginning to show signs of decline. So Natalie thinks it's best to move him to an assisted living facility to ensure that he gets the care that he needs. In order to pay for it, she plans to close the bookstore and sell this derelict but very valuable building in San Francisco. And the building itself has a great historical mystery storyline of its own in this novel. So it really weaves the story of the building along with Natalie's story. But the only problem with Natalie's plan is that her grandfather owns the building, even though her mother ran the business, and he is refusing to sell. So Natalie, wants to make him happy in his final years. So she decides that she'll move in as well to the apartment above the shop, and she's going to try to make a go of it. She, says there's a finite amount of time to try to turn this ship around, and so she just sort of jumps in. The story also includes a slow burn romance with the contractor that Natalie hires for repairs around the shop. And readers of Kristen Hanna and Nora Roberts will enjoy this feel-good family saga. And I thought the San Francisco setting and the backstory of the history of San Francisco was especially interesting.
Okay. My last book is nonfiction, and the full title is called Lady in Waiting, My Extraordinary Life in the Shadow of the Crown. And if you like the TV show The Crown, or if you like Queen Elizabeth or Princess Margaret, this was a great book that had, she was Lady in Waiting for Princess Margaret. So this is her life when she was at court, which was very interesting. And there's little intimacies that you get to see with the princess and the queen that, you might not normally see, but also her life in general was also very interesting. And it's also about how hard it was to find a husband at that time, and having the right kind of husband and the right kind of future. And her husband actually bought an island, which is still a Caribbean island called Mystique, where there's a safe harbor for rich and famous people like Mick Jagger, David Bowie, and Raquel Welch, and a bunch of other people. So he had bought this island and built it up, and then everybody started flocking there. And I guess it's still around today. But it was interesting to see that side, I think, of Princess Margaret, because we also almost get to see Queen Elizabeth most of the time. So we don't always get to see the side of Princess Margaret and her friends and things that she went through. So I thought it was very interesting. One of the stories that sticks out to me, which I don't know why it does, but when they were little girls, there's a picture of them and that was taken of Lady Glencomer with the princess, Anne and Margaret at the time, or Elizabeth and Margaret. And Margaret is looking down at Anne's shoes, and it turns out that later they found out she was jealous that she had silver shoes on, so she was looking at her friend's shoes, wishing that she had the same pair, and she's the princess. You know, I just thought that was really interesting. It was something that was really cute. So it was really neat to see those kinds of things and the interactions that she had with the royal family, as well as her own background. The next books that we're talking about, we just wanted to include some from Hoopla in case some people still don't want to go out. So Hoopla has some books that are available. They're always available for everybody. You download the app, you download the book, you're golden. You just need your library card number and your PIN number. And there's several ebooks on there. So we chose a couple ebooks that are available all the time for everybody to read.
Okay, and the first book we're just going to talk about kind of briefly is called Writers and Lovers by Lily King. And I believe this was a pick like on the Today Show for, I think Jenna Bush Hager has her book club. So this was one of her picks. So, so this is an extraordinary new novel about art, love, and ambition. It's by Lily King. And it is about says, blindsided by her mother's sudden death and wrecked by a recent love affair, Casey Peabody has arrived in Massachusetts in the summer of 1997 without a plan. Her mail consists of wedding invitations and final notices from debt collectors. A former child golf prodigy, she now waits tables in Harvard Square and rents a tiny, moldy room at the side of a garage where she works on the novel that she's been writing for the past 6 years. So at 31, Casey is still clutching onto something nearly all her old friends have let go of, which is the determination to live a creative life. When she falls for two very different men at the same time, her world fractures even more. So Casey's fight to fulfill her creative ambitions and balance the conflicting demands of art and life is challenged in ways that push her to the brink. So this story, so Casey is a smart and vulnerable protagonist in the last days of a long youth at a time when every element of her life comes to crisis. So this is a transfixing novel that explores the terrifying and exhilarating leap between the end of one phase of life and the beginning of another.
Okay, and then we have The Waterkeeper by Charles Martin. It's about Murphy Shepherd, who is a man with many secrets. He lives alone on an island, tending to the grounds of a church with no parishioners, and he's dedicated his life to rescuing those in peril. But as he mourns the loss of his mentor and friend, Murph finds himself that he may be more lost than he realizes. When he pulls a beautiful woman named Summer out of the Florida Intercoastal Waterway, Murph's mission to lay his mentor to rest at the end of the world takes a dangerous turn. Drawn to Summer and desperate to find her missing daughter, Murph is pulled deeper and deeper into the dark and dangerous world of modern-day slavery. With the help of some unexpected new friends, including a faithful Labrador that he plucks from the ocean, and an ex-convict named Clay, Murph must race against the clock to locate the girl before he is consumed by the secrets of his past and the ghosts who tried to bury them. He said that The Waterkeeper is at once a tender love story and heartrending search for freedom.
Okay, for the blurb for the next book, which is called The Queen's Secret by Karen Harper, it says, if you love Jennifer Robson, who wrote The Gown, if any of you have read that book, or The Crown, like the other book that Emily mentions, says you'll love this book. It's about Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. So Bess, they called her Bess, I think. So it's 1939, and as the wife of King George VI and the mother of the future Queen Elizabeth, The Queen Mother shows a warm, smiling face to the world, but it's no surprise that Hitler himself calls her the most dangerous woman in Europe, for behind that soft voice and kindly demeanor is a will of steel. 2 years earlier, George was thrust onto the throne when his brother Edward abdicated, determined to marry his divorced American mistress, Mrs. Simpson, and vowing to do whatever it takes to make her husband's reign a success. Elizabeth endears herself to the British people, and prevents the former king and his brazen bride from ever setting foot back again in Buckingham Palace. So Elizabeth holds many powerful cards, but she's also hiding damaging secrets about her past and her provenance that could prove to be her undoing. So now I'm intrigued because I don't know any of this. It says, in this riveting novel of royal secrets and intrigue, Karen Harper lifts the veil on one of the world's most fascinating families and how its secret weapon of a matriarch maneuvered her way through one of the most dangerous chapters of the century.
Okay, and then the last book is one of the titles. There's several titles that have been very, very in demand the last couple of months with the Black Lives Matters movement, and people are more interested in understanding race and anti-racism. So Me and White Supremacy is the title of the book, and it's kind of a workbook. It's a 28-day journey, complete with journal prompts to do the necessary and vital work that can ultimately lead to improving race relations. It's a critical text that helps you take the work deeper by adding more historical and cultural context, sharing moving stories and anecdotes, and including expanded definitions, examples, and further resources, giving you the language to understand racism and to dismantle your own biases. Whether you are using the book on your own or the book with a club or looking to start family activism in your own home, this is a step-by-step work through examining things such as your own white privilege, what allyship means, anti-Blackness, racial stereotypes and cultural appropriation, changing the way that you view and respond to race, and how to continue to work to create social change. So it's kind of like a little guidebook that you work through about anti-racism. So it's been very popular, and it's also available on Hoopla.